All right, welcome to TIL Talks with Chris White, where we talk TILs, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies, both with patients and caregivers, along with industry leaders. Let's get going. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. All right, and we are up. How's it going, John? Tell me about things. How you been?
Good, very good. Good to see you again, Chris. That was great. Our first conversation about a month ago. So fantastic. Thanks for inviting me back.
Absolutely. That conversation was extremely stimulating. And from that has sparked up so much more conversation that has come my way. And especially for today, which I wanted to highlight on, we can get into a lot of other things, but definitely wanted to talk about neoantigens and vitiligo. That comes up more than I could probably count when people get asked about side effects and they're looking at pictures of me of what I used to look like to what I look like now. But I wanted to kind of get more into detail on what are neoantigens and how does vitiligo play a role in take place and when someone does a cell therapy like TIL and that kind of a sign. So
Yeah, no, that's good. That's right up my alley. In fact, that brings up a good memory when I first met you in the hallway there at the Deloitte meeting. Seeing your vitiligo and kind of hearing, oh, he's a cancer survivor. I immediately knew, oh, you are a melanoma cancer survivor and you've had immunotherapy and you must have had a good response. And I just blurted out that, hey, you're lucky. Congratulations. You have vitiligo is like a shining star of goodness. We don't want to wish anybody to get an autoimmune disease, but when you've got stage 4 cancer, having an autoimmune side effect like vitiligo is one of the most favorable prognostic indicators of a good response, and it also underscores the mechanism of how the immune system works, which is also key to just your audience learning about what's going on with the immunotherapies.
it's just amazing because it's not like your entire body or all of your skin just goes from one shade to another. For me, especially, and then everybody else I've met, it's been real patchy and it comes up in spots in different places. And it's like a lot of things, there's no one size fits all for any of it.
Yeah,
But I remember hearing when I started asking about it, they're like, "Hey, like that." I was got a lot of smiling faces from all of my doctors and everybody that I was checking in with. They're like, "That is good," especially when it had been a couple of months for some of the treatments during a lot of this when this was all going down. So I was just kind of like, "That's super cool," because in my head I was thinking like, "Oh, I haven't had treatment in a while. I wonder how much is still in my system, like, is it still working?
yeah.
Like,
Do you remember? Did you get the vitiligo before you started the immunotherapy, the cell therapy, or when did you get it? Was it only after the TIL, or was it after the checkpoint blockade? Where was that in your story?
so, after I went from stage 3 to stage 4, I went into, the combination immunotherapy, the PD-1, CTLA-4, and I had done, it was once every 3 weeks and, to go in and get that combination, and that was in December of 2018, and I remember in January of 2019, that's when I started to see, like, some patches started to show up. I think initially it was, like, a little bit on my hand, but more than
Yeah,
anything, it started to be, like, right around, like, my goatee area of my mouth. You could see it, like, in my beard because I had, like, such dark brown hair, and it wasn't going, like, gray, it was just starting to go white, and it wasn't just the hair color, it was the skin, and more than anything, my eyelashes, I think, were the very first thing that started to change, and that in itself, was just really weird because I'd never seen anybody with white eyelashes, and everybody I was bumping into was kinda looking at me like I was, like, alien-ish. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, they're like,
You're
"Why,"
special. You're
they're like,
special.
"You look young, like, why do you have white eyelashes?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "I'm still trying to figure that out, but I've been doing
When you
treatment."
got it, do you remember, was the skin itchy or a little bit red or inflamed, or or getting fevers and flu symptoms. Like, usually on these checkpoint immune drugs, people say, "Oh yeah, I ran low grade fevers." Or sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I had itchy red skin for weeks," and then they lost pigment.
Well, at first it kind of started with like just some small rashes kind of here and there. But what definitely did happen, and I remember this vividly, was I did feel itchy.
Okay.
And it was I thought it had to do with the palliative pain meds I was on because I knew that that was one of the side effects, but since I was also going hardcore into PD-1s and, the immunotherapy, like, that was right there at the top of the list of, like, here's some of the possible side effects, and so it was like, well, it could be both maybe the palliative meds and then also this, but it was I didn't have any, like, specific, like, areas that, like, flared up, but I do remember having, like, some rashes and sending in some notes to my care team through the portal with asking about it. I was very vigilant on trying to keep them up to date with anything and everything that was happening to me because this was all, like, foreign language to me, you know what I mean? I was like, "Please, can you explain this? Because I can't." And so they were able to kinda say, like, that it is one of the responses, and as it went on, it kinda molded into some of my eyebrows, but it mainly stayed around the center section of my face. I did have some spots, like, on the upper side of, like, my right hand, I remember specifically that went, like, white. It was almost kinda like the after effects of, like a third-degree burn, like, after
Yeah.
it had
Yeah.
healed kind of a thing. Yeah, like a scar tissue
Yeah.
is almost kinda how to explain it, but it didn't go, like, everywhere throughout my body. It was kinda spotchy and kinda sporadic, you know what I mean?
In the beginning, and then it was later that you lost the hair turned white, and then the rest of the pigment. I mean, it's now most of your would you say most of your skin has lost pigment? Is that fair?
Yeah. So as I continue to do the immunotherapy after the turn of the year from 2018 and 2019, I had done my scans and I was still progressing. And
Yeah,
so, in order to get a lot of my disease burden under control, we had switched to chemotherapy with, I think it was like a CTLA, just a monotherapy immunotherapy, but it wasn't approved at the time to do it in
yeah,
conjunction. So I was only able to get like one dose of that. I finished the chemotherapy, ended up going back to the combination immunotherapy and doing radiation at the same time. And during that time frame,
yeah,
the vitiligo was really starting to kick in, but it was weird because I was gaining weight at the same time. I was just having all these fluctuations
yeah, yeah.
and I wasn't my hair, I wasn't like losing it, but it kind of like it stopped growing. I just remember like I hadn't, yeah, it was like I hadn't had to go get a haircut in like a while. And it was just like, it
Yeah, that
wasn't,
one dose of chemo.
yeah, and it didn't, it was strong enough to like, I just felt like awkwardly weird, but it didn't like eliminate it. And then it wasn't until fast forward when I enrolled to do TIL and then entered the hospital for the full out lymphodepletion, to do the two different chemos in the 5 days. And then I did the whole process. And I remember it was probably like the day I got released from the hospital because I spent, I think, 12 nights. It was 13 days, I think 12 nights total in the hospital. And it was the day after I got released. I remember like seeing or feeling like my hair was coming out. And I was at my grandparents' house and I had my mom just like shave my head in the basement. This was
Yeah,
like the second time like I had to shave my head. My dad had done it for me
yeah,
maybe 6 months before when I was doing Abraxane post colitis before finding out that, hey, I gotta do TIL or go to hospice.
yeah,
And so my hair had grown back just enough, but it was still real short and everything. But I could feel that like it was about to come out in chunks. And so I just went ahead and shaved it. And I did it with like a little bitty baby of a guard. And when I look at some of the pictures, I kind of reminds me of, do you remember those commercials from the Six Flags where it was like dun, 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 dun. I that's the dude I look like. It was like that the bald, guy that was dancing around, but it was that bald character that I kind of reminded. I almost looked sicker as I was getting better than I was when I was actually sick. And then At that same time as I had shaved my head and, had lost my body hair, it was kind of baby butt bald. And then when it started to grow back, that's when it became back like bright white. And my pigment that was usually like very tan
Yeah,
and everything just naturally, it didn't take much for me to tan at all.
yeah,
That's what became, like, very white, and anytime I would go out in the sun, if I didn't have full out, like, long sleeves
yeah,
and wear sunscreen, I would flare up with, like, real easy sunburn. It was those areas that started coming back real splotchy-like, real kinda cheetah-like, and so is only those areas I exposed to the sun. So like the back of my neck, parts of my hands, the palms or the top of my hands, my forearms and everything. It wasn't my entire body, but the more parts of my body that I exposed without coverage would start becoming more splotchy and everything. And now that it's been 6 years or so, I've had enough exposure here and there, and it's kind of started to blend in. It's not as splotchy, but
yeah,
going back to 2020 and 2021,
yeah,
I mean, dude, I looked like a redhead, like checkerboard.
yeah.
Yes, and I didn't know how to explain it. It was kinda made me feel insecure for a little while because I didn't know what was happening to me or could tell anybody why or how.
Yeah. Do you think some of the pigment is growing back? I mean, do you notice, or usually it doesn't? I mean, once your immune system has done the job of vitiligo, it rarely grows back, but it can, usually around the hair follicles, it might grow back a little bit. But do you think you're starting to get some pigment back?
Yeah, the more that time goes on, the more that the splotchiness has kinda gone away and the more that it's kind of blended into, like, a solid color. You can kinda still see, like, the differences, and then especially, like, when you look into my hair and right after I get a haircut because the salt and pepperish, when you go to look at the scalp, the pepperish parts are coming from, like, newly, like, dark, like, spots. I don't have anything raised
Yeah.
at all on my body. And I was doing quarterly skin checks for quite a while. And then it was just now it's biannually. But the spots they're more like the freckles where the pigment has come back. In those areas, the hair color has become kind of dark. And that's what creates the salt and pepper look, both within my head and throughout my body hair. And I'm not sure how well you can kind of see it, and I can always point it out better, but my neck is the most uncontrollable like spot that is always exposed, like no matter what. I mean, and so that's the area that was one of the first to really start changing, and that's how I kind of compare things to. And even today, I like if I'm not putting something that's like kind of covering it or anything like that. I mean, I can feel the heat coming onto it. It doesn't even have to be hot, but it's the UV exposure to it, and that's where I see like the most change.
Yeah, well, that's like I said, it's favorable, and that might be a good segue. You asked about neoantigens and antigens, and then I told you I do have some slides that explain a lot about vitiligo, and probably are very good teaching for melanoma, because melanoma really was the first immunotherapy, model of how the immune system could kill cancer. But the antigen just means basically a protein or any kind of molecule on the surface of a tumor cell, or really anything that your immune system could recognize. That's an antigen. So an antigen can be a big protein, it could be a little bit of some sugar residues and a protein, or it could be like a foreign antigen like a thorn, or a bacteria or a fungus. So an antigen could be really anything the immune system can recognize. And so when you ask about what is a neoantigen, neo means new. And so a neoantigen would be a new antigen. And you think about from your body as a host, you're the host of your immune system's going around kind of surveilling your body all the time. And your immune system should just be seeing old, boring, normal you. Like nothing should be new. Your immune system should just be all you, so not neo, not new, unless you step on a thorn. If you step on a thorn, the teaching is, oh, well, you mount an immune response. A thorn creates a red welt. If you get a splinter, there's a little bit of the thorn, or a mosquito bites, the immune system goes to attack it, and that's where you get that inflammation. So a neoantigen in the sense of tumor immunology would be a normal body antigen that becomes mutated in the tumor, and therefore it looks like a new foreign antigen in the tumor. Now, the good news and the bad news is, yeah, tumors mutate and nobody wants to see a tumor grow. But a little bit of good news is if the tumor gets mutated enough that the immune system can recognize it as foreign, that's a good thing because then now your immune system has something to target. And the reason the melanoma is very interesting is melanoma started from lots of sunburn. Therefore, the sunburn can cause a lot of mutations in the DNA. Therefore, melanomas that are born out of lots of sunburn, and the melanoma grows, they usually are highly mutated. The melanoma is highly mutated with lots and lots of neoantigens. So your body's immune system had an easy aim for an easy target of all those sunburned neoantigens that were in the tumor that made the tumor start in the first place. And the reason the vitiligo, of course, is the immune system is so powerful that as it kills the melanoma, it gets off target. And we tell patients it will start to get confused and target the organ that the tumor started in. And in your case, the tumor started in a melanoma, but what is the organ of the melanoma? Is really the organ is the melanocytes, which is the pigment, right? We could call it an organ. Your pigment system could be like a mini organ of under the skin.
Well, your skin is your body's largest organ, correct?
And is when we first discovered organs, yes, that was technically. But if you want to be really technical, probably the biggest organ system in your body, although it's not really considered an organ, but the endothelium, which is the entire inside of the endothelial, all the blood vessels, all inside your body, which I guess would be the vascular system if you look at the surface
It's
area.
kinda like the highway where the cells move. Okay.
But the skin is where the melanocytes mostly reside, therefore causing the pigment. Melanin is a pigment in melanocytes. Melanin is also in melanoma, of course. So when you get a vitiligo immune response, and the immune system's killing your pigment, we can just tell right away that your immune system is working so well, it must be killing the tumor itself. And so that's very favorable. Despite the hassle factor of having vitiligo, the upside is it's a very good sign the immune system is turned on and doing its job against the cancer.
It's extremely curious to me because, I had a subtype of melanoma. I had, mucosal melanoma, and I specifically had anal rectal mucosal melanoma, and I remember hearing it at the first time in 2018 that the pathology came back as melanoma, and I immediately just think like most people do. I'm like, UV rays, sun, and, I was kinda jokingly in the back of my head thinking, it's not like I was sticking my rear end up in the sky,
Yeah,
like tanning. But anywhere in your body where you have, especially mucous membranes, you have melanocytes, and that's how the correlation with melanoma is. But there was a researcher I was speaking with, and I think it was on one of her proposals she was writing. But one of the opening paragraphs had this dealt with and said that the only thing that mucosal melanoma has with traditional cutaneous melanoma is the name. And I was then speaking with another researcher, doctor, clinician, this past January. I think it was at ATW, and he was talking to me about neoantigens, and he was telling me that if I started to see a drastic change with my skin pigmentation, to definitely go get looked at and to get checked, because the way that the TIL had worked within me had caused my tan pigmentation type of skin to go white, to wipe itself out and to basically like start over. So it always kind of concerned me, and it still kind of does in a little bit, to wonder like, when if I'm seeing signs of pigment coming back, should I be concerned? Or
that's a really good question. Classically, when patients get vitiligo from an autoimmune disease, it doesn't get better on its own. And also, classically, when patients get vitiligo from immunotherapy, usually it doesn't get much better. Maybe a little bit better. You might say, "Oh, I noticed a little bit of eyelashes growing back black," but usually the immune system is durable and it remembers the attack that worked, and it continues to have those memory immune cells that keep kind of doing the vitiligo. Plus, the vitiligo cells themselves, the stem cells of the vitiligo, in the skin, they just don't grow back in that patch. Now, the point that you raise about anal genital melanoma, and we have some slides of animals that get anal genital melanoma. You're right. The sun don't shine in the anus, but in the skin, classically, melanomas are hypermutated just from all the sunburns. So the rare cases of melanoma, like acral melanoma under the fingernails or anogenital melanoma, mucosal melanoma, they classically, historically, have not had that great of a response to immunotherapy. They often are excluded from immunotherapy trials. You got really lucky, but there's something special about your anogenital melanoma, which is making me think it probably is hypermutated, not from sunburn, but maybe from one of the mutations it got when it was started, just a random mutation, an unfortunate mutation. It probably got a mutation in a DNA repair enzyme pathway. And because if you have a mutation in a DNA repair mechanism, which some cancers do that, then as the cancer grows, it can't repair itself. So its DNA gets sloppy, its proofreading gets more sloppy, and the cells that grow that are growing fast get more and more sloppy. And pretty soon, in months to years, that tumor becomes hypermutated because it can't repair its own DNA. And it was one of those hyper mutations in your anogenital melanoma, probably not sunburn, right? But that may have caused it to be foreign enough for your immune system to mount an attack. The other clue, and this is worth asking if you don't mind sharing, did
Yeah,
they
not at all.
did they do inheritable gene testing for you or for anybody anyone in your family have
Yeah, nobody else in my family had anything. In fact, and then when my pathology initially came back, I had a CDK4 amplification with an MDM2 mutation, but that was it. That's actually one of the reasons why when I had to switch off of the PD-1 combination to chemo and single immunotherapy, they had me do pembro was because that's one of the many immunotherapies that they use within breast cancer, and CDK4 is popular within that. So they were thinking like, hey, like this might also have a solid effect for you. But I mean, nobody else in my family other than, my grandmother on my mom's side, she passed away of lung cancer in the early 2000s. And then my grandfather, my mom's father, he passed away of lymphoma, or excuse me, leukemia in the early like 2010s. And this was, I know there was CAR T trials going on at the time, but I don't recall, he wasn't actually in one. But other than my two grandparents, there's no other family history like at all of any of that. I do have on my father's side some MS and RA, some siblings with like Crohn's, autoimmune diseases. My nephew recently, within the last couple of years, diagnosed with diabetes.
yeah.
Whole nother reason why I'm into cell therapy so much, because I know they're working on these treatments for all these other, not just like cancers, but all these other kind of diseases. But one of the things I recall specifically was that I did sign the consent when I did do TIL. They had me do this additional deal because I did mine at CU Anschutz in Colorado, and they have the Rare Melanoma Center. And I had, it was probably, I want to say like at least a golf ball, man, if not like the size of an egg. Like, but my tumor that they extracted to grow my cells was huge. And so they had plenty of tissue, and CU was able to keep a solid size sample of that. And I know that they were able to do some testing and grow additional DNA and everything. And so they sent me like the paperwork on it. I'd probably have to share it with someone like yourself to help me read it.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's a lot of complicated pages and pages of all that. But from what it initially was in 2018 to what the DNA had like morphed into by the time they did my resection in 2019, and infused in 2020 to what it would be like now,
Yeah.
like it would change. And I remember asking them when I was in the hospital getting my infusion, if like it didn't work and it came back at some point, like what would they do? And they said we would re-infuse you with your TIL. But I think that was only within like the first year or
Yeah.
something like that, because they had extra samples from my batch. But to do it, like if it were to come back now, I'm sure they would have to do a new resection and then get the most up to date DNA. And I'm real proactive about being like, if they could bank it and, and like it would work. That's I would because that's when I'm the healthiest. I can grab the healthiest sample, but by the time like I'm needing the infusion, like my DNA would have morphed, and so that it would have changed. It needs to be the most up to date, accurate
Correct. Yeah.
form.
Do you remember when your the mutations you said at the beginning that you mentioned? Do you remember when they did the resection? Did they tell you or do any other genomic testing, like showing that the number of mutations had increased or there were many more mutations? Do you remember anything like that? Any reports on it?
No, but I had written down some notes that I wanted to be updated on that, so I could kind of try to follow it. I've been
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of become like a student of myself in a sense. Like it just invigorates me. But I there's probably like a 300-400 page like document of my like history just at UC Health, and within that, as I was looking through it, I couldn't find anything specifically related to that because I was trying to look it up.
One of the things that we could do on the next future call is look back at your mutation report and just for teaching your audience and learning about that. On those reports nowadays in modern the past decade, they actually will give a specific number called the total mutational burden, TMB, and they literally can count the average number of mutations. So, like a very low burdened mutationed tumor, like let's just say for an example, a young, healthy teenager gets a sarcoma. There are only a very few mutations, maybe one or two mutations per megabyte or much fewer. A sunburn patient with melanoma or a heavy smoker with lung cancer will have like a dozen mutations per megabyte. A hypermutator who has an inheritable gene that causes BRCA mutations or something like that that can't repair DNA, they will have 20, 30, 40 mutations per megabyte, and those are so hypermutated that it's almost predictable that immunotherapy, the checkpoints will work, or other immunotherapies would work. So it's a small victory when a patient brings a genomic report and they have a total mutational burden in the high teens or 20s or 30s, and we're saying, "Wow, your tumor is hypermutated. How many cigarettes did you smoke?" And you're like, "Hey, please stop smoking. We don't want you to die from emphysema or more lung cancers, but if you did smoke for 20 years and you do have all those mutations, at least I can tell you some good news is that immunotherapy is more likely to work." So does that make sense? Just about
Yeah,
the I ask about the mutation score. The other thing that you said that was so I doubt you have the inheritable cancer genes. About 15% of patients these days, we're learning, do have an inheritable cancer gene. They just don't know it unless they get tested. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, my third cousin removed, two of them had cancer." So it always is if you have cancer, everybody should get inheritable gene testing to see if they're in the 15% that didn't know it, because it could affect your family and your children. The other thing that's interesting is we're learning now that a lot of cancers we didn't think were inheritable, like breast cancer, we knew, breast cancer gene. We're learning that men who don't, if you get breast cancer as a man, you almost guaranteed have the breast cancer gene that runs in the family. But
I got a
if
story about that actually
yeah,
when we're done.
but men who get colon cancer or pancreatic cancer or at a young age get prostate cancer, and even if they get a glioblastoma or even a melanoma, they can have the BRCA gene, the BRCA breast cancer gene. So that,
Okay,
but usually their tumor's so hypermutated, and they know they have it because a genetics counselor will say, "Oh yeah, we checked you." I'm sure if you went to those big institutions and they did all your genome, they probably would have found that and told you that. But because you don't have a hypermutated melanoma, like the typical skin cancer melanomas do,
like a NRAS, C-KIT,
like all those,
BRAF, all
those
that
are
stuff.
those are specific mutations that are associated with some of those melanomas. But when we say hypermutator, it means that you've just got 5 pages of mutations and your total mutational score is like in the high. It's just like the mutations are all over the tumor. It's almost like no two tumors are alike. They're so hypermutated in your own body. But something you said very interesting, that is autoimmune tendencies run in your family. That is some good news because if you had siblings with Crohn's or aunts with lupus, and that can be an inheritable trait, like a hyperimmune response. And that could be your reason why your immune system mounted an immune response. Not because the tumor's hypermutated, because you didn't get sunburned in your anogenital area,
Yeah.
and not because you inherited a tumor mutation, but you might have inherited some immune traits that were immune hyper reactions run in the family. And then that would be favorable for why you did mount such a robust immune response. So
Wild. Like most of the time when I'm going to pull up all my records, it's all in written text and everything. And what I'm really looking for, which would be like super helpful, is to see like a graphic of sorts. Is that something that y'all do when you pull out the reports for your patients and everything so they can kind of visualize it and get a sense and look at it and kind of see the trend and go, oh, I mean, because that's personally, like, that it's super helpful, and I get asked that a lot because how are they able to tell? Because by reading it, it can get complicated.
I mean the mutation scores or the pattern.
Yeah, yeah,
Modern like omics reports, these, next generation sequencing, these $10,000 reports. There's probably a dozen companies now that are doing them. Their reports are like 20, 30, 40 pages of lots of graphics, lots of mutations, lots of pathways. The MDs don't have a PhD in every single pathway. We might have learned about
yeah, it's a
one
lot.
biochemistry. There's so many, but we do see some patterns that we learn about. And yeah, we can sometimes put those together. Speaking of like melanoma immunotherapy and autoimmune tendencies, you've heard about the ipilimumab, which you had, which is
Mhm.
CTLA-4. It's known that some patients that have a inheritable mutation in CTLA-4 actually will get autoimmune tendencies. So your siblings that had Crohn's disease and your cousins and aunts who might have some autoimmune tendencies, they could have a very mild, subtle mutation in something like a CTLA-4. And that just shows you the power of a CTLA-4, why we're targeting it for autoimmune, targeting it for immunotherapy in cancer. But most people don't have a mutation in CTLA-4, but if you do, then you can still live a good life, but you might have a tendency for autoimmune disease. And that's just a theoretical thing that might explain why your siblings have autoimmune tendencies in your family and why you had a good immune response. So,
Gotcha. It's my nephew, my youngest nephew, that is got diagnosed with diabetes the last couple of years, and that's one of the things I kind of wonder about. Is there was like I think my sister thought that he had like heat stroke because we just came off of like an August like weekend like at the lake or something. I mean, and like there was no reason to think that he had had it before. And I talked to some other patients to where they had had similar diagnosis as but they didn't always have an autoimmune disease prior to a cancer, and that they were diagnosed with that autoimmune disease afterwards, and they're trying to figure out, like, is it due to possibly from the therapies that they did, or did they always kind of have it? And it's just like, I mean, it's a timing thing. Nobody, I mean, I don't know.
how young was your nephew when he got insulin dependent diabetes?
Oh, I mean, this was like 2 years ago, so like 8 or 9 or something maybe, you know what I mean? Like, he's young. He's in elementary school.
That is like a classic autoimmune destruction of the pancreas, insulin producing cell. So, yes, to your point, with a really good immune response from cancer immunotherapy, which we hope it kills the cancer, but a very common side effect is any autoimmune disease. Just like vitiligo is an immune disease, check. Thyroiditis. I don't know, did you ever get thyroiditis or
Well, immediately, that was that was the first side effect that did happen to me was
thyroid?
my thyroid went out, like, in my first, set of labs after doing immunotherapy, and I mean, I didn't actually get it balanced out to what the dosages I take today until, like, a couple of years ago. So even while I was going through treatment and even the first couple of years afterwards, it was still a fluctuation of the milligram dosage to get it right. And for the last, I wanna say at least since 2022, I've had it at the same dosage, but for 3 or plus years or so, I mean, it was high, it was low, it was just trying to figure it out. But I had all these other things going on in my body that it was
Yeah.
like, if it was just that, then they could probably narrow it down. But, different treatments and
Yeah, no, that's a classic. That's probably the most common immunotherapy side effect is the immune system attacks the thyroid, and we can live without a thyroid as long as you take the supplements. So you have the two classic, typical melanoma immunotherapy side effects that are manageable, right? Vitiligo and thyroiditis is manageable, so you're in that. That's favorable, and that means it's working. That's still an autoimmune disease. I haven't done so much immunotherapy over the years. I've seen the immune system attack almost every organ, or any hormone organ as well, right? Pituitary gland,
Oh,
adrenal
it
gland.
totally did.
It even cause, people can be celebrating their tumor shrinking 6 months in, and then they'll get an autoimmune diabetes, like out of the blue. And it presents really high sugars of 500, 600. So the immune system is that powerful when you release the brakes just with
Oh,
the
it's
checkpoint blockade.
it was nuts. I mean, so the hypothyroidism was like the first like side effect. The signs of vitiligo was the second one.
Yeah, hypothyroid.
Yeah, and then the colitis that ended up kicking in 2019, like, it's a sneaky kind of a thing because I was assuming I just had, like, an upset stomach, like, I ate too much for Easter, like, they'll describe to you, like, what the side effects are of
Yeah,
getting colitis, but, like, they're so mistakable for so many other things that I didn't even think about it until it was just full blown inflammation and everything. And it was just like out of control. And then one of the other side effects from the immunotherapy, which I definitely know is related to it, was the uveitis. Because as I was going in for my extraction the week before that, I thought I kind of had a cold. I was getting like some eye goopies and
yeah,
stuff and everything. And then it just kind of got worse. And I remember them telling me as I was signing consents for TIL that, one of the side effects could be uveitis and so forth and everything. But it was like, well, this was already all kicking in before I even got into doing TIL.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
couldn't really do anything about it until I was done doing TIL. And so my eyelashes slowly started like falling out. I had like no eye protection. I couldn't, I saw an ophthalmologist, I saw the retina specialist, they're talking about doing steroids and all this and that. But I had all these different protocols and rules. But after I got done doing TIL, I had to go back to work. And so I ended up having to have cataract surgery on both of my eyes to fix my eyesight.
Yeah,
And this was like right when COVID had started. So I had this 90-day window from getting released from the hospital and being able to come back to DFW from Denver and then go back to work. And since COVID had started, like I needed lots of help with getting to my appointments because I couldn't drive.
yeah,
What I'm saying, or see. I mean, and then even once I had cataract surgery, they gave me an eyeglass prescription, but it's like the dust hadn't settled yet. And so it really didn't do me that well until some time later. But I that question comes up a lot in one of the support groups that I had started through Facebook. Was they're asking about cataracts and uveitis and if whether it's TIL related and this and that. And it is one of those things where it could be a cause, but if you already have those symptoms leading up prior to doing TIL, it's when you had done a lot of immunotherapy that you
yeah, yeah.
could totally be one of those things that's related. But if you're not cognizant to look out for those side effects, then like you gotta be able to speak up and say something. You know what I mean?
So when you got the thyroiditis, the vitiligo, and then the colitis, this is all from this is before TIL. This is the checkpoint drugs. Do you remember when you got the colitis? We usually will grade that at like, how many bouts of diarrhea, cramp,
Yeah. So
on
like
steroids.
I ended up doing 6 of those combos in 5 months. I did 2 combos, then they took me off and put me on, 3 cycles of CBD chemo and a single dose of Keytruda,
Yeah,
and then I finished that, and I was stable enough to go back to immunotherapy, so I did 2 more doses of the combo, and then that's when I did high dose, low dose radiation to my lungs, and then this giant spot on this neoplasm next to my kidney that was just out of control,
yeah,
and then 2 afterwards. And so from December 28th, May of 2019, I did 6 of those combos, 1 single. single immunotherapy, 3 cycles of CVD, 5 doses of high dose, low dose. And it was just a lot of stuff compacted over this 5 amount of months. And my colitis inflammation was so insane. I dropped 30 pounds in 30 days from like the middle of April, from the time I finished my radiation until I went in to go get my scans. And it just kind of started out, like I said, like I thought that an upset stomach, I ate too much because I had gained like a bunch of weight during the chemo portion and everything up to that. Like I was on palliative meds and edibles and all this stuff, and then like I went from like just eating all the time to where it was like, oh, I don't have that much of an appetite, but it's okay. Like I can go, I can go today and just have just a little bit, and then each day it just got a little bit worse and a little bit worse, and then over 30 days, like
Yeah,
I just wasn't eating, and then it got to the point to where I just the diarrhea kind of effect just it
yeah.
got out of control, and so they had put me on high dose steroids, prednisone. It was like 140 milligrams a day, but what is with a very strong taper program, and along with that, they were like, "Hey, get some Remicade infusions," and
Oh, you did get the
immediate.
first aid as well. You did get the
Well, yeah, I actually ended up getting 2 of those total, and but the thing was the taper program for the prednisone, it was just like a standard, like here's the taper program, but it was like you got to come off the steroids in order to get back to the treatment. You cannot be on steroids and
yeah,
continue
oh, yeah.
treatment. It's got to be 10 milligrams or less, or none of they wanted
Did
like
you
none.
get hospitalized for any of the colitis?
That's exactly what happened because as I as I within that first month, is I almost immediately had to start tapering, and I immediately it's like my body wasn't in a spot to heal, and I could feel it. And so it's like the day would start off like okay because I had all the prednisone and everything going and the pain meds, but as that wore off, and then as I had to continue to taper down, like the end of the day just became like this nightmare, and the evenings became like a night terror. And then yeah, I ended up getting hospitalized for like
Yeah,
6 days within a month after being diagnosed with the colitis, and then I got released from the hospital from that,
yeah,
and it was the same, but the taper program was the exact same thing. And I almost immediately started doing the same thing again. And when I went back into the hospital, I didn't want to be admitted because I was like, this is just this endless cycle. So they gave me the TPN new nutrition deal to go into my port. And it was 24 hour or 23 out of 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. And it was back up to high dose prednisone. But this time, since it was my third go with the prednisone, like I like sat down and I wrote out my own taper program to kind of like slow it down because I knew that if my body wasn't feeling well enough to come off of it, then I was just going to repeat this cycle and the colitis was going to kill me and not the cancer.
yeah,
And so it was so miserable. In fact, going through the colitis and the taper program and all of that, like that's worse than, like, any of the side effects from any of the treatment, any of my hospitalizations, going through IL-2, going through like, the coming off of the prednisone, just nightmare, like, that gives me PTSD, dude.
yeah.
I mean, like, I just sometimes it's just like, man, I just wanna talk to somebody that understands
So
it, you know what I mean?
you're talking about it because there's a couple good teaching points here, both for docs and patients. So in retrospect, you would have had by definition severe, almost
Yeah,
life-threatening TPN, antibiotics, hospitalization. Probably what should have happened, and this is what we teach the young docs, when they're playing with immunotherapy. When you get 2 immune drugs, release the brake, a PD-1 and a CTLA-4, release the brakes. I look at docs and I teach them, you have just released the brakes of your cancer patient. They have no brakes to their immune system. So that means any little bit of inflammation in their body has no brakes. Like if you step on a thorn and you get a little bit of inflammation in the foot, it's just going to keep spreading up the leg. You ain't
you
got
say
no
that
brakes.
infection could go everywhere.
Yeah, not even an infection. It's the inflammation just going crazy. So what happened is we tell docs, dear docs, when you give these drugs to patients, your patient has no brakes of the immune system. They're going to get hyper amplified immune response. So where's their brakes? The immune system. Who's their brakes? Right? And I look at the docs like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You're their immune system breaks. You're their breaks. You better make sure what the hell's going on with them, and they better be on your speed dial so you can call them and they're not like lost slipping between the cracks." And what we do for safety, because we do this so much, we make sure every patient has a bottle of rescue steroids with them.
See, that's
Uh,
gold.
so if
They
you
didn't they didn't
look back, this is what,
this 20
2019,
yeah, 2018, 19.
in my opinion. They should have known by then. It's part of a safety protocol. Most good hospital systems, most good docs that are slinging doublet immunotherapies, you give them the teaching. They get a rescue bottle of steroids. And even when they start getting mild diarrhea, mild
They
cramps,
can start
they
taking
can
it,
heal.
and they
Yeah,
can
they should just not get another dose of immunotherapy. Just get a short, easy, gentle course of immunotherapy, easy course of, steroid taper so it doesn't escalate. And so if you were dragging, and maybe you weren't telling the doc or the doc didn't hear you or got lost in the translation with the nurses, in my opinion, you should have been started on steroids a lot earlier in a lot like slower taper. So this didn't get out of control that much.
well, the thing is I live in North Dallas, but the captain of the ship was down in Houston, and I would go down to Houston to get that's where I had my, the radiation I initially had to do. I had one of my surgeries down there, but every time I had to do my, 6-week scans and labs, and I would go down there, but when he would prescribe, any kind of systemic treatment, whether it was immunotherapy or chemotherapy. Like I didn't have to physically go another 4 hours down there to do it. I mean, I could do it up here, and so that's what I did. But at the same time, it was there's two separate like systems, medical systems. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So there wasn't like a standard protocol for their communication, and I was kind of wondered. It's like I wasn't on like a group text or group
Yeah.
email, like, and so I would always ask both of them, did y'all talk to each other? Like, are you up to date with what's going on? Are you up to date with what's going on? How do I know as the patient? And it was kind of frustrating in a sense because it was like the pressure was on my shoulders to make sure that they're both communicating, but they're a part of two separate systems. And
Welcome to America.
it
Welcome to
yeah,
America.
and they both had good points because doctor down at MD Anderson, he had told me from the get-go, like, "You have anything that's going on, let me know, like, 2 days before it happened, like, be that proactive," but of course, I'd never had any of it before, so I didn't know to
Yeah.
recognize it even if it slapped me in the face, and then my oncologist that was administering my systemic treatments up here in Dallas, she was just my local lady. I mean, like, she's the one who told me to go see the specialist, and so she had some like knowledge, but there was definitely a disconnect. But it wasn't either one specifically like one of their faults or anything. And like I internally like I wanted to kill the cancer, and that was always my goal. And so I almost in a sense didn't want to tell the captain of the ship what was like really going on because I
That's
only had like one more treatment to go before I knew I was going to scan again. So I was trying to
yeah.
get that in. So I kind of manipulated that. And that's no secret.
Yeah.
Like I put it in my book and I
That's
tell people that, like,
that's a little bit dangerous. So you were in what we call a moral hazard. You want the drug to work. You're willing to tolerate some toxicity. Yeah, how many diarrhea did you have? And you're like, oh, only three. It was 7 or 8. But
yeah, I mean,
that's the moral hazard. But you could have died from an
I know that
colitis.
now.
Now, so this is good lesson for the docs that know this. The docs, you can't always trust the patient because they're in a moral hazard, right? They don't
Yeah.
want to skip the dose. They don't want to. So the way you got to look at their scale. If the patient walks in and their resting heart rate's fast and they're losing weight and their albumin's going down and they're like not telling you the whole truth, then you get a loved family member, loved one to get the truth.
Bro,
Yeah,
like, I'm not even gonna lie, sometimes I would wear, like, my work boots, steel
yeah,
toe, like, in jeans and, like, heavier I would wear, like, heavier clothes so it seemed like I didn't lose as much weight as I really did, but
yeah.
it
I got
became
you.
way too apparent to, like couldn't lie, I remember, my dad was witnessing, like, I couldn't eat, like, a freaking orange popsicle without throwing up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it was just like,
You're
yeah,
lucky.
I couldn't hide it anymore, you know what I mean? Like
So that's letting it go too long, and I'm sorry you had to go through all that. But the other thing, so we all of our patients that get a rescue bottle of steroids. We get them very strict
dude, that's genius, man. Like, is that just y'all or do like is that more kinda
oh well,
standard or
preach that when I do teaching and, did these programs.
I love that, dude.
Here's the other thing, we're even more strict. We're so strict that we don't even rely on the patient. You're a good example because men are usually stubborn and don't follow instructions. We make a caregiver sign an agreement that the caregiver is gonna be responsible for their loved one, so you don't get into that moral hazard. Moral hazard is you're trying to do something you think is right, but it's really wrong because 'cause you're afraid of the worst
It's
outcome.
like the checks and balances, you know what I'm saying? Like the trifecta of
To go on an experiment with us on these new modern super, super strong drugs, yeah, we are a system lockdown of SOP safety. So, yeah, and the other thing I'm gonna say, I don't know how the hell you got on TIL therapy because you would have knocked out every single exclusion criteria with I mean, most of our modern immunotherapy trials in phase 1, they won't allow you if you've had a grade 3 itis and hospitalization and you had 2 autoimmune 3 4 autoimmune diseases or and hospitalization. So you would be nobody would wanna touch you with an experimental drug. How did you get on the TIL study? I mean, did you have to, like
dude,
did you
like
have to consider about how that's the
you got
background?
like remember what I said earlier about how I was having to deal with different organizations?
Yeah,
Well, the organization that was the captain of the ship, that was
yeah,
the specialist, like once I ran out of options with them, that's when they told me about it. And because I couldn't do anything left with them. It was if I were to stay with them, it would have been like whatever they would have had, I would have failed on, and it
yeah,
was hospice. And they actually had the program been around for like four
yeah, oh,
plus
yeah, yeah, yeah,
decades. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And they told me they're like they had the program, but they had to shut it down the day before I came in for my last follow up
yeah, yeah,
because all of their qualified people got recruited out of there and they didn't have the infrastructure to run it anymore. And they couldn't tell me about it beforehand because I literally qualified to do it 9 months before I did it because all you had to be, I wasn't BRAF and I had progressed on PD1. And so the phase that I entered, they started enrollment for that in February of 2019. And so I went in for
yeah,
checkups both in January and in February of 2019 and had progressed.
yeah.
And
And
they,
all your itis had resolved by so you didn't look like, somebody
no, I
just
mean,
to
like
start
the colitis hadn't kicked in yet. I mean, the hypothyroid was there, but I'd already progressed. But in theory, they were still hoping that the immunotherapies would eventually be the end game.
yeah, yeah,
And I was still under their care. But they also told me like they couldn't tell me about the trial that I eventually ended up getting into because my boss's oncologist was a consultant to the sponsor, and it was a COI to do so.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, since I could no longer, I wasn't going to be a patient with them anymore, it wasn't a COI anymore. And
yeah, yeah.
so, it's kind of frustrating a little bit, but I've let it go. You know what I mean? Like I
You
understand it a little bit more, but I was a billable patient, man. I was willing to do whatever I had to do, and
you
but
were on the trial. I thought you were part of the trial, or were you a standard of care commercial, patient?
well, I mean, once I left the organization down in Houston,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's I left their care and then entered under the care in Colorado, which is a whole
Yeah,
nother organization that had, the
yeah, yeah,
sponsor. So, but that was the thing. Like with throughout the entire 18 months from point I was diagnosed until I got my TIL infusion, I was at three separate organizations. You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? And the specialist where I was seeing it, they specifically told me they had their own programs and have run them for years, but since they didn't have the infrastructure anymore, they couldn't even offer it to me. And but their criteria for growing their cells, because I ended up looking it up down the road in the last couple of years,
Yeah, yeah.
was like twice as long as what it was that the sponsor is. Like it
Yeah.
took the sponsor for me, like it's a 3 week cell growth and I think maybe a week at QA. And they were able to tell me immediately my cells were growing. But
I probably had a lot of till in the
yeah,
tumor.
and then but the original organization like that I was seeing my specialist at down in Houston, their cell growth program was like a 6 week
Yeah.
cell growth. And so it was like my cancer was way too aggressive to probably even approach it. And that's probably one of the reasons that they didn't bring it up as an option while I was doing it because it was just too risky. Like they were scanning me every 6 weeks at a minimum just to make sure that like, cause and it was the whack-a-mole. Every time I would go in, it was like, all right, it might be a little stable here, but now you got a new spot over there. It's okay over here. I mean, it was just this roller coaster. And
When you finally did get dosed with the TIL, your itises were under control, right? Like your
yeah, no, so that's exactly it. They
well, you
made me
got
do they made me do another colonoscopy when I went to go sign my consent in Colorado to make sure, just to
away
verify that my inflammation was gone.
because the Remicade worked and you had weaned off. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I mean, so, my the
But he had
colitis initially kicked in at the end of April 2019, and then, like, I was full throttle May, June, July,
yeah,
and then sometime in August, like, finally was able to go off it. I went back to work and all this, and even though I'd been off the prednisone, like, they still wanted to double check, and so I'm now 43 years old. I've had 3 colonoscopies, 2
yeah,
of them before I did TIL, you
yeah.
know?
Well,
It's
that is
wild.
it's quite a story. The other things just for safety teaching, when we dose immunotherapy, we also tell the patients, that story about their body's a holy temple. Any little trigger of inflammation gets amplified. We use specific examples of all the horror stories I've seen where patients have done the wrong thing, ignoring their symptoms.
Don't do it.
Hides under the covers. I'm supposed to feel bad for 3 weeks. That's the big red flag. So that's why we implemented the caregiver.
I
The other
love
one
that.
is the other one is especially with the PD-1 class of drugs is lung inflammation, pneumonitis. With CTLA-4,
Had
it's
that too.
colitis. So the pneumonitis, and we've seen that get triggered by inhaling the wrong things. Like they go to campfires thinking, "Oh, this is a good community
It's all the
campfire."
carcinogen smoke from the campfire
Inflammation,
that's
and it
inflaming
triggers
it.
rip roaring, and that's why we also make the patient and caregiver sign that they're not gonna smoke. We don't even want them to vape. We don't want them to put anything in their holy temple body that's gonna trigger inflammation. Another, like fireworks, they think, "Oh, fireworks are safe," and not for you, it ain't. Or sunburn, regardless of the vitiligo story. If you are a lung cancer patient or any kind of immunotherapy and you get a bad sunburn, your immune system now is hyperstimulated. You're going to start getting chronic psoriasis, itchy rash. You get skin inflammation that's hard to turn off. The other
Extra
example,
sensitive, right?
because your immune system is so bad, like even dental work, we say, hey, no elective dental work on immunotherapy because you're getting a hyperimmune response.
Yeah.
You'll get a little flu shot is going to be a big welt. Otherwise, people think, oh, I'm on immunotherapy. I'm going to climb Mount Crowder's locally and overexert. You're going to have a rip roaring arthritis and myalgias that are going to last for days. And then, oh, the worst, and I hope you didn't do this to trigger your colitis, go eat something that you've never had before. And you say, oh, I'm going to go eat this foreign food I've never eaten, and I'm going to try so much of it. It tastes so good in my mouth. And then you just get indigestion and cramps. And then that starts a whole process because new foods that you've never seen, you just mounted an immune response. Or the worst is patients think, "Oh, I'm gonna take all the herbal remedies that all my relatives send me because I just wanna be nice and
Yeah.
take it," and you're eating herbs and roots and mushrooms, so you don't know where, and you don't know what they do. I can tell you what, your body's never seen those. You are guaranteed to get a gut-itis. Not on my watch.
The
You better
microbiome, like we should definitely
go.
highlight microbiome on another one of our deals, dude, because that is so nail on the head.
They're like, "Doctor, I'm taking that because I wanna stimulate my immune system." I was like, "You will in your gut, and then you're gonna have the worst itis ever." So, we have to explain to them, "Stop everything. Don't smoke. Don't do this. Don't get sunburned. Don't do anything to your holy temple that's gonna trigger an immune response because we need you to stay on trial." So,
Yeah.
the only thing inflamed in your body is the tumor. And that's the only thing your immune system knows to go to. That's just it, not any other things that you do to your body. So these are good teaching points that we kinda try to
Oh,
keep.
you're 100 on that. Like, any bad habits that I had,
Yeah.
prior to treatment, I pretty much dropped. I'm not shy about saying this, but I was an open like cannabis user like my entire life. But when I got diagnosed and like it went to my lungs, and then my report said innumerable amounts, like there's too many to count. I definitely wasn't smoking anymore. I was eating, some edibles for a little bit. I had a nicotine addiction for a long time, which went to vape. And I was like, I'm not even doing that. So I ended up getting on the patch and quitting all the nicotine. My health habits, like just with dietary stuff, like I ended up moving in with my mom and she's a certified health coach. And so I was like a huge like soda drinker and like
Right.
fast food, like single
That's
people
for
life.
sure.
And I ditched all that crap,
That's
dude. And like she had me eating like really good. And I was just real cognizant about what I was putting in my body. But I was also real cognizant, like I didn't want to get stagnant at all. And so even though like I was still like doing systemic treatments, I would always make it a point to go to work every day because I was always walking around,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and even if it was just for a little bit, but like I always had this thought that I was like, man, if I'm just like sitting around and like ain't doing anything, like that can't be good. Like it's like an engine of a car. Like it might have no miles on it, but if you ain't driving it, like
yeah,
it's gonna get rusty and shit's gonna break. You know what I'm saying? Like you gotta at least move it around a little bit. And
yeah,
so I was real kind of cognizant and of all of that. And I really do feel that a lot of those habits I kind of adapted through all that kind of formed me to my life, like post treatment, everything. Like I don't smoke or inhale anything. Like I don't drink soda anymore. I'm very cognizant about what I put in my body. No processed foods, fast foods. I don't eat shit. I'm sorry, excuse my
yeah,
language, but if I have to spend time and read ingredients on something, like man, I'm wasting my time. Like I
yeah,
shouldn't be eating it, dude.
yeah.
And it's just
That's good.
like
That's another talk. We got to do a whole talk on.
that's what I was saying, like microbiome, you know, like I'm a huge believer in that. Like, but gut health and also, and this is something I was talking to Ben and Jeff about on my pod I did with them and afterwards, but the physiology of a patient, like if they're like a little bit knowledgeable or know about the treatment that they're going into, and these are all like really new, novel things and stuff, and it's almost seems like a foreign language. It can be real confusing, a lot of scientific vernacular and verbiage and stuff. But if it can be explained to where they understand it at least somewhat, to where they're kind of like almost can get excited and like mentally like back themselves, like they believe in it enough to
Yeah,
I just I think that mentality of those endorphins that get released and all that other stuff, you know what I'm saying? That like you just can't just be complacent and be like, well, I'm just taking the medicine, it should work and all
yeah.
this and that. I was like, you still
Yeah,
have to do
the
other things that aid and help it, healthy habits and
patient is 50,
movement.
the patient's habits are probably 51% of good medicine. And you're right, and it's the motivated, healthy patients that A, follow the directions, but read everything about it, and then try to do even better with their other supportive care that they do better for most chronic diseases. But yeah, this is good. So let's promise the next time we talk, we'll show you some slides of vitiligo in animals, including anogenital and animals curing themselves with melanoma with vitiligo. It's just remarkable, inspiring animals that are in the animal kingdom that can do this, that gave additional credence to immunotherapy's potential. And then we can, in the next few talks after that, we can even talk more about some of these other biomes and then the American food system and all those. I think that's caused
Absolutely.
epidemic of colorectal cancer. I mean, we're getting 2 and 3 calls a day from patients wanting trials because 'cause they're in their 40s and 50s and have colorectal cancer. I mean, this is like it's colorectal cancer now is a tsunami in young people, probably because they've been having things in the food chain, industrial chemicals, and I can name a few chemicals that are all been added to foods that are probably contributing, and it's very, very sad. Very, very sad, and I'm telling you what, if they can learn, like, to understand some of those ingredients that are literally, like, forever chemicals that they're eating, it might help prevent some colon cancers in 10 years from now.
I mean, yeah, no, that would be huge. It's that whole what is it, that NBC thing? The more you do, like it's just it empowers people, I think. And so one of the quotes that I use in every conversation I have with this is you don't know what you need to know until you need to know it. But if you learn by default,
Yeah, yeah,
man, that's a bad way to figure it out, you know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to learn the lessons the hard way, and sometimes this is a scenario where you gotta experience it, but at least if you're have, informed about it, to a
Yeah.
certain degree, you can kind of make a better decision. And whatever happens, happens. But at least you can't say, like, I didn't know. Like,
No, now we'll be well, very good. Yeah, this is good. So I appreciate, another hour of this good talking and, yeah,
man,
let's
I
look
love
forward to
this.
the next one. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
All right, you bet.
To everybody out there, thank you again for joining in on TIL Talks. Sending love and peace. All right, that concludes today's episode of TIL Talks with Chris White as we talk TILs, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. I'd like to thank my guest today for joining me on TIL Talks. To our listeners who have not yet done so already, please follow, comment, subscribe, share, and smash that like button. For more information about TIL Talks and related resources, please visit www.tiltalks.com. I'm Chris White. As always, sending love to everybody. Peace.